All right, folks, so down here in the Defending Windows section, there are 3 projects to get you going with Velociraptor, which I am very pleased with. And then there's a project that's not recommended here I'll mention later. But here's what my recommended procedure to get started with Velociraptor is. You need a Linux machine and a Windows machine, which is why you have those 2 machines. And what you do is you use the Linux machine to run the server and the Windows machine to be the client. And the point of Velociraptor, we've used Splunk. And in Splunk, you're looking at log data, but you're not interacting directly with a live system. You're just looking at the logs. In Velociraptor, it is more than just an SIEM system, Security Information and Event Management. It is an incident response framework where you control all the machines and you can launch hunts to run a script hunting for evidence on all the machines and accumulating it so you can do real incident response. You analyze a machine, you find some evidence of compromise, you define indicators of compromise, you declare a hunt, and then you hunt through your network to see which machines are compromised. It's very nice. There was an older product called GRR from Google, which did the same thing, but it was sort of a pre-beta and it never really worked very well. And Velociraptor was based on that and designed to improve it, and it just got bought by Rapid7 a month or 2 ago. So it's going to be a commercial product and developed and improved, so it's really worth learning. What we're using here is the currently existing free version, and I don't know what Rapid7 is going to do, but what they've done with other products is they continue to have a free version, and then they also have a pay version too, which is what I imagine they will probably do. Anyway, so you go to GitHub, where Velociraptor lives, and you can see that we're still on release 0.60, been that way for about a month. And this is fine. I wrote these instructions assuming it was that version. So then you need 2 things. You need the Linux version and the Windows version. It uses the same executable for the server and the client. And so we need the Linux version to put on the server, and we need the Windows version to put on the client. But they both have to end up on the server at first, as you're going to see. So then you prepare your server. It is extremely simple. You just wget the Velociraptor executable, and then you just make it executable with chmod and you just run it. You don't install it or anything. It's just a single executable that you just run. Very nice, very lightweight. And so it can do various things, but the first thing you do is generate the config. This will generate the configuration file for the server. And you can put it in this velociraptor.config.yaml. And then the only thing wrong with it is by default, like most products, it only listens on the local host, 127.0.0.1, because they expect you to open a browser on the same machine and view it for security. But I usually use headless cloud servers that don't have a GUI and they don't have browsers, so I like to overcome that. So I wrote it that way in these instructions. So you find your IP address, and then you go in the config file and you replace localhost with your public IP address and 127.0.0.1 with your public address. So it will listen on the public address, which is of course less secure, but more versatile. And so then you take the modified configuration file and put it in /etc. And now this is how you run the server. Oh no, first you have to create a login user, pardon me. You have to do a user add. Based on that config, you add an admin as an administrator, and then you give it a password. So you define what the administrator password is going to be, and you run it here. So let me spin up mine live. I've got virtual machines locally, running it. And there we go. I've got a Debian machine here, and I've got a Windows machine here. So there's my Windows, and here's my Debian. Now this is in fact a desktop Debian that has a GUI, which I could in principle be using, but I never do that. I don't really like Linux GUIs. I just use them as cloud servers. So the only thing I care about is the IP address. Get this thing to go away. It won't go away. Fine. Part of why I never use the stinking console. All right. what's the deal here? Okay, IPA will give me the IP address. If it will ever start listening to me, there we are. Okay. IPA, there we are. So the IP address of this server is 172.16.123.38, and I prefer to use it in just a naked SSH window, which is why you'll see my instructions say just work in an SSH window. This is how you use headless servers, and it's easy to use cloud servers this way. So it's SSH Debian at that IP address, and then a password. Okay. So now this will control that Linux machine, and I don't need to see this desktop anymore. All right. Now this machine probably already has Velociraptor running on it. So let me check. The simplest way to see what's running for networking is sudo ss-pant. This will show you all the things that are listening on network sockets. And as you see, Velociraptor is running, and I want to stop it, so I'm going to kill it. It's PID 19829. So I'm going to do sudo kill 19829. And now if I do ss-pant, it's a lot smaller, and the only stuff that's still running is SSH, which I'm using right now to control my server, and cups, which is printer sharing, which doesn't matter at all. And Velociraptor is not currently running, just to get to the state where you'll be in. So after you've done those commands I talked about, you will have created a directory called Velociraptor. And if you go in there, you'll find here's the Linux server software. That's the Windows, and here's the Linux version. And I've already made it executable, so it shows up as XXX, meaning it's executable by all users. So to run it, I run this to start the server. And this is, I love this stuff. This is the simplest, most primitive way to handle servers. It's a running process just right in one window. That's what the -v does. This runs the front end, and it's verbose, so messages will just scroll by, and you have to leave this window open and running. So it tells you here, this is glorious Velociraptor with ASCII art, and then various parts of it starting, and then when it's ready, it is ready to the front end, is ready to handle client requests. We don't care about that. That's going to be used by our client, which is pre-programmed. The GUI is what we want to control it. And that's just sitting right at this address. So you can just open this address in a web browser. For you using my cloud machines, you'd open it on either the Debian or the Windows machine, either one. I'm just going to use my native Mac here. And that's what I was using for Splunk. So I'm going to close these Splunk tabs and make a new one and put in that address. And like many products, it's using a self-signed certificate, and it might ask you to go past that. I think it remembers I've already told it before not to worry about it. So I give it my admin name and my password that I chose when installing Velociraptor. And now I have the Velociraptor homepage, which is sort of like the Splunk homepage we saw before. Now, this is the informational page to get going. Here's the home page under this home button here. And that tells you server status. And you can see I already have a client. You can see all your clients by hitting Show All. And there's the client. This machine, Win10sus, has that client ID. Now, when you start your server, you'll have only the Linux server, and it won't be connected to a client yet. So the first time you run it, it will just look like this, and if you go to the list of clients, it will be empty. So there's a flag just to show that you got your server running, and now you have to add a client. So you or have to open a new terminal or SSH session because one of them is running, showing all these messages, and you need a new one. So let me do that. Make a new one, and Control C. Let's make it bigger. Okay, so it's SSH Debian at all right. So Velociraptor is here. All right, so there's my second window into it. Here's my old one, just running Velociraptor, showing its status messages, and I'm just going to shove that to the side because I don't need to do anything but leave that open. This one here, I had to add this one line to the certificate to tell the client that we're going to use self-signed certificates, and it should not like pause and give us warnings or something. So let me just point that out. If you go here, there's the Velociraptor configuration file, and it has a certificate. It uses HTTPS, but it's not the kind of certificate that you have to pay for or get from Let's Encrypt or anything. It's just a self-signed certificate, which will cause every browser that uses it to complain. And so here we tell the client to expect and tolerate the fact that I'm using self-signed SSL. It would be a good improvement to actually put in a real digital certificate there, but I'm not doing that yet. So to make your Windows installer, you get the Windows software, which is the EXE version, and then you combine the two parts together here. You repack the Windows executable to include the configuration built into it. This makes a custom executable that will call back to your command and control server called repackaged velociraptor.exe. And so I've already got that stuff done here. That's what this thing is. That is the Windows executable that will join a Windows machine to my Velociraptor server. All you have to do is run that on your Windows server. Now there's the minor irritation of how do you get a file out of your Linux machine and put it in your Windows machine. And there are 100 ways to do it. The way I did it was with a Windows SCP client. So install WinSCP on your Windows machine, and then you can log into the Debian machine from Windows and get that file and put it on your Windows machine. And then you run it in an administrator command prompt. You run service install, and your Windows machine will now have a service on it, which I should be able to see right here. Here's my Windows machine, and if you open services, you see all the background services running on this Windows machine. And if I scroll down to the V's, all right, moving a little slow for some reason, but Windows is often extremely slow. More about that. Here's Velociraptor. The Velociraptor service is running. And that's what connects me to the server. So now I can view the client. All right, and there's a flag to get here to get your client working. So there's a few more fun things you can do from your Velociraptor page. So here I am. Let's make this window bigger. All right, so I did show all. See my clients. Here's my client. It's a Windows machine. And here's what you can do with your Windows client. You can hit VFS to access the virtual file system. And now, here you can see the files on that Windows machine. If you click File, it will show you C and D. If you click there's C, it'll show you what's in C. If you go into someplace you've never been, like Windows, then there's no data available, then you have to hit this button to refresh the data. I'm going to go into Cookie because it's smaller and it won't take as long. I refresh the data. And now it shows you what's in that folder. So you can traverse through the file system this way and see what's on that machine. That is connecting through the usual Windows Explorer, where you see things like C and D. You can also have direct access to the NTFS volume, which lets you see files even if they're open and locked. And this is what Microsoft refers to with this, this configuration here, / / is how you refer directly to hardware in the Windows world. So I go there. Now you see the usual folders, but you also see the special objects that are not visible to the normal user, like the master file table, the recycle bin, and so on. There's objects here that are not intended to be manipulated by end users. There's the master file table, which we'll play with later. Anyway, so that's just referring back to the same stuff on the hard drive plus some extra control structures. Here's the Windows registry. You can just look right in the registry right here. So if there's nothing here, I refresh it. It'll show me what's in HKey current user, and then I can go and say system, refresh, current control set, where you have a whole lot of fun settings, refresh. And I can, dig my way through the registry here. All right, and the artifacts we're going to see another way. So let me just check my instructions and see if I skipped anything here. There's the file system, the registry, more in the file system, and now collecting an artifact. We're going to get Netstat. Okay, so this is where I spend most of my time, is show all, view your client, and now collected. This is where you collect information from the client, and you can choose from a large directory of pre-installed scripts. These are little things called VQL scripts that fetch data from the client, and most everything you want to do has already been prepared for you. For example, Netstat. You want networks. If you just want to know about the network information, here's Windows Network Netstat and Netstat Enriched. If you click on it, it will tell you what it is. This runs the Netstat command on Windows. There may be parameters you can adjust here. You click the wrench, and there are no parameters for this command, but some of them have parameters. So you launch it, and now it's running on that client. This, by the way, is very advanced. You might have a fleet of 1,000 machines all connected to one server, and it starts a job asynchronously on all of them and gathers the data later so that you aren't waiting for it to finish and all that. It can really handle all the scheduling and stuff. When you only have one client, it doesn't matter. But this is really intended to be a server that handles a whole fleet of machines like a domain controller. So here's Netstat. You select it up here, and now here's some information about when you ran it and such. If it uploaded files, they would appear here, but Netstat doesn't. Here it logs the requests on the server in the VQL language. This is the Velociraptor query language, which if you're an advanced user, you'll learn how to write your own queries. I've never had to do that. Everything I need is always in one of the pre-made queries. And here's the results. You just see what's listening. Here's all the things listening. On port 135, and that's a Windows process. That's RDP. Someplace down here is going to be Velociraptor itself. Listening on 88, 89. Oh, that's right. This is the Windows client. It's not going to be listening on Velociraptor. It'll be an established connection to my server. So here's things that are listening. And all right, anyway, so there's network traffic there. And here's the log, which shows what it did. Started queries execution, ran it. It took 300 milliseconds, and it gave 48 results, which shows up here. So that's Netstat, and there's Netstat Enriched is here, and it's enriched because it gives you more data, and it gives you search options. So there's parameters. You can search for IP addresses or port numbers or an IP version family or type of connection. There's a bunch of things you can do to search. So if I wanted to find just the listening processes, for example, I could go here, and one of these, the others will let me control it. Family, all, type TCP, or status. There's listening. I could do listening TCP only, for example, and launch that. It's running while you see the hourglass. And if you get tired of waiting, you can look at the log. But it's done. It took 5.6 seconds. And there's the processes that are listening, and it gave me a lot more information about them, like the MD5 of the executable, the path to the executable, the username it's running under, and the authenticode signature, which is really useful. This tells me if some company has signed it. This thing has been signed by Microsoft, so that's not malware. The things that are not signed are more likely to be malware, like whatever this is not signed. I think, unfortunately, it's also something from Microsoft running in a system, but it doesn't come with much information. And that, of course, is the problem. Not all Microsoft code is, in fact, signed like it ought to be. Microsoft has legacy code they haven't signed, so you have to get used to them. But in general, something signed by a reputable company, you don't have to worry about it. All right. So that's the joy of collecting artifacts from the system, and there's some flags here to find. And that should get you started. And there's a couple more projects here, which I was very happy, where you infect your Windows machine with malware and you analyze those incidents with Velociraptor. And I'll talk about them a little later. But this should get you started.